Hello, Brady. This is Perch, and well, let's get right into it. So, we've got a question for a viewer who recently went to a convention and talked to a writer, and they have questions. So, let's get right into the mail. It says, "Hey, Perch, thank you for your show and entertaining me so much on the drive home. I recently went to a comic convention. I believe it doesn't list it, but I believe the comic convention they went to was the one I also went to, the Fan Expo in Dallas. But anyway, recently went to a comic convention and I had the opportunity to meet a creator who is a writer for one of the big two. I don't want to say his name because I don't want to create unnecessary drama, but it's somebody that you took a picture of at the show. So I'll say the name. So that's Tom King. We're talking about Tom King here. Anyway, I took a photo of Tom King and I said, I'm going to go up and ask him to do an interview on the show. That was I didn't wait in line, so I didn't actually get a chance to ask him that question. But the answer would have been no, and that's okay. As I mentioned in this other video, Tom King looked tired. It's COVID's been rough. I don't say it as an insult. He just looked. When I see people who look kind of just tired, or I notice it, and my natural instinct is to go, man, I hope they're okay. That's my number one always instinct, no matter who they are, no matter what's going on. And I don't have any big beef with Tom King in all seriousness, but he looked like life was a little rough right now. So hopefully everything is okay. Anyway, we'll get back to the email. I waited in line to get some things signed by Tom King. He was pleasant, but a little quiet, and I decided to ask him about some of his online interactions and why he thought there was so much fighting that went on around things that he say. Are there fighting around that? Well, I guess so. Anyway, sorry, back to the mail. What struck me was that Tom King was genuinely confused and seemed dismissive over the controversy. He seemed dismissive and confused over the controversy. He didn't really seem to know what I was talking about, and when I pressed him, he seemed to not think it was a very big deal. However, it seems to be a very big. It seems to be a very big deal based on all of the videos and the comments people make about Tom King. So what I want to know is this: do you think he was honestly surprised and didn't know things were going on, or was he just hiding it very well? I don't like the way that's framed up, but anyway, we'll get to it. What do you think? Thank you very much for all you do, Perch. I appreciate your show. Okay. And then some other stuff here that's not relevant to the mail. So, why I say I don't like the way that's framed up is because it's like, do you think he's confused or lying? It's kind of the core of that question. And I don't think life's that simple. But it folds into, I've said this in videos in the past, and I honestly and legitimately, I don't know why this pisses off people, or they're like, oh, Perch is misguided, or he's confused, or whatever the thing is. But I've talked to many creators firsthand, and most of them, the vast majority of them, do not get this online dynamic of why there's a segment of people who seem to dislike them or be annoyed by what they do. The one guy, and I appreciated it, who seemed to completely understand, was when we did the interview with Ron Mars. He talked very openly of like, I like to go in and poke people and get a reaction. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but that was basically. So what I liked about that was the pure honesty in it. Jeff Thorne has said similar things, to be honest. And it's nice because it's like, hey, I go on Twitter. I don't take it seriously. I poke people. People get angry, and that's more or less that's my entertainment. Now, I wouldn't do that for me, but I like just the honesty about that. It's there's somebody who's connected saying, I'm doing this. I'm getting a result. I understand it. A plus B equals C. I get it. But that's not the norm. Most people seem completely confused by all of this, completely confused why people are upset, what they're upset at, and they're not getting it. They don't get why people are frustrated. So I've had many conversations where I'm like, well, here's kind of why people are frustrated. The problem is when you try and sit down and explain this to somebody who's thoroughly confused, it often comes across as extremely petty. And I'll give you an example of this. So let's use Tom King as an example, because that's who you're clearly talking about at the con. Tom King works with Mitch Gerards, right? He has on other books. He's worked with several people. Worked Clay Mann as well. So let's take Tom King, Mitch Gerards, and Clay Mann. Okay, now let's say Tom King goes on to Twitter and I don't does what that whole thing that went on over Jay Lee, where he basically was upset at Jay Lee, or some people were upset at Tom King that Jay Lee, who was the artist on a variant book, did art a variant cover for Cyberfrog. And then they're like, how is Tom King working with this? And Tom King basically went out and goes, I don't support any of this. There's only one cover for my book. I'm washing my hands of this. I'm paraphrasing. But basically, like, that's all bad. And then this spawned an entire kind of bizarre, angry campaign against Jay Lee, a guy who, needs the work. And I'll just put it that way. And then it turned into a weird kind of back and forth. And again, a lot of history had happened there. I'm not accurately portraying what happened. I'm not going to recreate that history. But basically, this whole flurry happened. And when you listen to people's videos and people's commentary, and please don't do I never heard about it. Come on, it's in the headline of thumbnails. People were also irritated at Mitch Gerards. Now, they're irritated at Mitch because Mitch would, I think, like some of Tom King's tweets during this entire, debacle. So I don't recall if Mitch actually went in there and replied or said anything, but he definitely liked it. He got involved secondarily. And then Clay Mann did not get involved, as far as I know, but then people were mad at him too because he was working with Tom King, and the argument was, you're working with somebody who's attacking another artist. You should make a statement saying you don't agree, or that was kind of the dynamic that was going on. So to pull back for a minute, what you have is, person A makes a comment that irritates people, but that person A works in the same company and the same books as person B and C. And so this irritation, this anger, spreads like a virus and starts to infect people who are not even part of the original source. And this is what you have going on in comics right now. You have, a Vita Ayala, a Danny Lore, a Dan Slott, somebody like that will say something on Twitter. It's, again, as I've said before, I think they shouldn't be saying things like that. I think going on Twitter with the purpose of having a fight and calling people out, I think all it does is create poison into the water. But what happens is like a Rod Wright. People who are irritated at Vita, you don't see a lot of irritation at Rice, who's working with Vita on New Mutants. But there is some. And it becomes unfair to Rice because now he's stuck in a terrible position. The position is, hey, the person I'm working with on this book is making this noise that's pissing people off. I'm also working on that book. I'm not involved, but I'm getting to be involved by association, and I get sucked into it's like the Sarlacc pit of Twitter, which is actually a good analogy of Twitter in general. You just get sucked into the lowest common denominator. But in a nutshell, that's why people get irritated at folks in comics. That's also why a lot of people in comics don't get it. Now, even the people at the source who are making these comments, they view Twitter as not real world. They view Twitter as I'm making comments and it's almost this fake other world, which in fairness, it kind of is. Twitter isn't real. And as I mentioned before, Twitter does represent a fraction of the comic buying audience, like not even a significant amount. It is why people at Marvel can say things like, I hate all Republicans, like some of them are saying right now over this Roe versus Wade situation. Or, when Trump gets elected, the editor for the Avengers titles can come on and say, we'll remember who you voted for. And, with the implied threat that there was going to be consequences. But, the comics didn't shift too much in terms of sales. Why? Because like a tiny percentage of the people on Twitter are buying the comics. The big reason why the comics shifted in sales, why they've been going down, is not crazy shit people are saying on Twitter. Well, I mean, not directly. It's the quality of the comic if you pick up Avengers right now, it's not compelling as a comic. It's not mainstream mass market compelling to read. Now, I think you could argue that, maybe it's the fault of so many people on the creative team are wasting their time on Twitter, and instead they should be focusing on quality comic books. And I think that's a valid argument. You can certainly make it, and sure. But this is another reason why creators seem surprised when people pop up and say, what do you have to say about the angry fans? And so it's very easy for them to dismiss those fans as, well, there's just a group of online hate trolls. And so they basically group all of it because the criticism doesn't make any sense to them. Now, by the way, this isn't me defending the creators. It should make sense to them. And if you notice, the creators that are more successful over time stop, pause, consider what's being said, and then readjust. And that's very true. If you look at the people who survive all this stuff, who get more work, who get a good following, I've had people come up to me and say, I don't understand why Sean Gordon Murphy has a big following and why people pay attention. He's not even on Twitter. And I responded, hand over heart. I responded, swear to God. The fact that you're asking the question that way means that you're massively disconnected from what's actually going on. If you're saying the cause and effect of Sean Murphy's popular, but he shouldn't be because he's not on Twitter, then you are thoroughly misunderstanding Twitter, its impact, what it does, how meaningful it is, all of these things. And it's this bizarre trap of thinking that people get into. And the fact that people do view Twitter as more of a game means that, if it's a game, it's in many ways, and people are going to hate this comparison. It's not unlike Twitter for comic creators is not unlike a 14-year-old kid who goes on Call of Duty with a headset and starts just shouting racist shit at people while, they're shooting people. The 14-year-old does not thoroughly understand that this is not real life. They're not out in front of real people. They're just playing a character, more or less, in this game. And that's how a lot of people view Twitter. They're playing a character in this game, the game being Twitter. And so if you're playing a character in this game and you're not taking it as seriously, when somebody asks you, hey, what do you have to say about fans who are angry about your comics? It doesn't compute. It makes no sense to them. They go, but I don't even understand the question. The question is absurd. Of course, because if you don't take any of it seriously, that's where you get. And the situation with, say, the Mitch Gerards and Acclaim Man, it gets even weirder because they'll say, but I didn't say anything. Why am I being judged by what, Tom King says? And the answer is it's not fair. But yeah, you're judged by your associations. I mean, and nobody believes that's fair. Nobody likes that. It is why if one individual, one person goes out and acts like a jackass as part of a crowdfunding team or a group or comics feed or whatever it is, people will associate the entire group by that one jackass. Is that fair? No. But that is human. That's how humans are. That's human nature to behave that way. We judge people by their associations. In lack of other information, we do it. And so if you can fight against that. You could say, well, it's not fair. I'm different from those people, or that's one person and there's thousands of people over here. And so the percent, you could do that until you're blue in the face. It's not really going to change anything. That's how people are. That's how they understand stuff. So comics are an interesting thing. I think that it's a little bit more empathy would go a massive way. When I say a little bit more empathy, I don't mean just fans to creators. I mean everyone. I do think a lot of this stuff that goes on, the creators should stop, pause, and consider how all this stuff is playing out and how the effect is with fans. That's not a fun thing to do, but I think it's a necessary thing to do. And I wish more people would do it. It would make life a hell of a lot simpler if people would just consider that. Consider how these things are approaching. Consider how much attention people are drawing away from comics as a result of this stuff. So, for what it's worth, I think it would be helpful. Do I think what I'm saying right now will change a damn thing? Absolutely not. But there you go. Anyway, I'm glad you got a chance to meet Tom King. I am glad he was confused why there's anger to some extent. I think that shows at least a position in which somebody could learn and grow, as opposed to screw you, get out. I I would argue, hey, that whole thread you did, the shenanigans about the mask. I mean, the other part about creators, quite frankly, is there's too much sometimes of creators who, they write fantasy for a living, and so they go on Twitter and they want to write a little bit more fantasy. And I think there's a lot of that goes on too. It's like they take these events. It's kind of like the whole, I'm getting so many death threats, I need to hire a bodyguard to protect me. And it's like, oh, the bodyguard was your friend, and he wasn't hired, he wasn't bodyguard, so just stop with that. I think that doesn't help anything either. That destroys credibility, and again, it makes everything feel like a game. And when it feels like a game, people are more comfortable acting like jackasses because it's not the real world. But anyway, I don't know. Let me know your thoughts below. Get irritated with what you're going to get irritated by. I'm fascinated to learn how, and thanks for listening.